to Ready, Set, EdTech with Lindsay and Jan. I'm Lindsay.
Jan.
We are so excited to have you here with us today for this episode as we talk about SAMR and becoming a SAMR samurai.
That might be karate. I don't know.
Today, we're going to really be talking about an instructional design framework called SAMR that really helps us think about how we're using technology in the classroom to create new transformed learning opportunities for our students through the use of the technology. As we do that, we of course are going to incorporate all of our Iste standards for students. And so this year, North Carolina adopted the national Iste standards for students. And you see them here on this slide that will be shared in the show notes today. Of all the areas that we as educators need to address with our students in the classroom, you can click on this image and it'll actually take you to the standards and give you more information on how you can address those standards.
And we also need to keep in mind the North Carolina digital learning competencies. These are kind of like standards. They help you improve your practice. They drive student learning. It basically talks about how to incorporate digital citizenship, digital tools in your instruction, kind of gives you a little guide. And you can really focus on these to help you kind of level up on your teacher evaluation as well.
Absolutely. They're closely aligned with that teacher evaluation instrument and just the things that we need to do to be a distinguished educator. So let's dive in and take a look. But before we start, I want to bring and share this quote here from George Kurios. We had the opportunity to hear George Kurios just recently, but he's a phenomenal educator and leader in the world of innovation. And so he shared this quote that I think is really important that we as teachers, especially this year, keep in mind is that technology is never going to replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. And that is so true. And I think this year has proved it even more than ever that we cannot just put kids in front of a computer and them succeed. It takes great teachers doing great activities to ensure that they're learning. Don't you agree, Jan?
Yes, and I think we learned a lot. I think a lot of teachers have learned a lot from this experience for sure.
And so what we challenge you to do as we think about SAMR, really what it does is it just challenges us as teachers to think, okay, what is it that I can do with this technology that I couldn't do before? So for years, we've been struggling to get one-to-one, and now we're there. And all of these tools are available for us on the internet. There's so many great things that can be done. And so really taking the time as a teacher to reflect on our practice and say, okay, what learning opportunities can I create with this technology that I could have never done before to give my students more invaluable, engaging, enriching learning opportunities. So let's take a look at the SAMR model. This is probably the most common image or depiction of the SAMR model. This model was designed by Dr. Ruben Quintadora, and this is probably the most common way that you will see it. And it kind of looks like stair steps, but we're going to challenge that thought a little bit today as we talk. But essentially, you have SAMR, your levels of SAMR. So S stands for substitution, where the technology is just simply a direct substitute with no functional change for what you would have normally been doing. Augmentation, the technology acts as a direct substitute with some functional improvement. And these two areas here, substitution and augmentation, really are in that enhancement. It's enhancing your instruction. But you'll notice there's this dotted line here. And if we push ourselves a little bit further in the SAMR model to look at modification and redefinition, we're really going to begin to transform the learning opportunities that we have created for our students. So modification is where technology allows for a significant task redesign. So students are doing things that they've not done before or doing it in a completely different way than they've ever done before. And then redefinition is where we have a completely new task that we could have never done without the use of the technology. And so we want to go through this session and just really look at each level of the SAMR model and talk about those a little bit more and a little bit more in depth.
So first, let's look at substitution. This is where the technology acts as a direct substitute. So in other words, instead of having your students write an essay on a piece of paper, you would just simply have them type it on a word processor or in a Google Doc. There's no extra steps. There's no extra technology in there. You just basically have them typing instead of writing. So many teachers get stuck here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is an easy way to incorporate technology into the classroom is by substitution.
This is kind of that first baby step that teachers take, right?
Right. And there's nothing wrong with being here. Like we said, it's not a ladder. You're not trying to begin and then step up and step up. You can You can go anywhere in this model. And as it says here, notes in a Google Slides instead of a handout. That's just another example.
Yes, and a lot of times this is where we all start, right? How do we start using the technology in our classroom? And so one big one is the online worksheets, taking a worksheet that we would have done paper and pencil and putting it into a PDF format and allowing kids to annotate. That's just substitution there.
And I do want to mention, I saw an analogy one time about relating this to coffee. So substitution would be like, you're home, you made your coffee. Well, a substitution would be to go to Starbucks and get the coffee. It's basically just, you're doing it, it's the same, but you're just doing it in a different way.
Oh, I like that. Yes, I can relate to coffee. So after substitution, we can move up into augmentation. That's taking it just a little step further. And so not only are you doing a direct substitute, so that paper to a Word document, but now you're going to add some functional improvement to it. These are things that make things just a little bit easier for your life. So when we think about that paper example we talked about, writing paper in a notebook versus writing paper in a Word doc, when we add in the spell checker and the grammar check and the word count and the thesaurus, all of those extra tools, that's when we start to see some functional improvement. It makes life easier for us as a writer by putting it into this, adding the technology in. Another good example that we're very familiar with is our Google Forms, using it as a quiz. So we're not replacing the quiz. The quiz is the quiz is the quiz, right? But we put it in this Google format, and kids answer it in a Google form so that it's easier to grade and it's easier to take. But the learning task isn't transformed. They're still just taking the quiz. So the task is at the same level, but we have some improvement like in the grading. So that's how I like to think about augmentation. So how would that be in coffee words, Jan? So we got our Starbucks. Now what would we do for augmentation?
Augmentation would be something like adding creamer to your coffee. Creamer or sugar. It's still coffee, but you've just made it a little bit
sweeter
flavor, right? Adding a little flavor to it.
Yeah, I like it. All right. So let's look at the next level.
The next level is modification. This is where tech allows for significant task redesign. As it says, instead of a notebook journal, students write a blog or connect with each other. I look at this, when you cross that line from enhancement, think about that coffee, you're just enhancing a little bit, but then you're crossing over to transformation. It's almost like you almost can't do it without the technology. Mm-hmm. I would say if we were talking about that Google Doc, now you're collaborating and working on Google together. So you're putting comments in and you're communicating with another student and doing something together. So it's basically adding collaboration is a good way to put it too.
Yes.
Creating a brochure with video and hyperlinks. You don't just type the information in, you're actually bringing in media into it and connecting it with other websites and sources. So you can't just do that with a simple Word doc. You have to bring in other digital tools to kind of enhance the learning process.
Absolutely. And then taking it even to the next step, right? So,
wait a minute.
Where's our coffee?
Okay. So this would be like a caramel macchiato. How do you say that? Macchiato?
Caramel macchiato? Yeah.
You still have coffee in it. Okay. But it's not something you can really make at home. Now let's think about this. Substitution, you can make it at home. You're just going to go to Starbucks. Augmentation, you can still make it at home, put creamer in it and everything. This is like a caramel macchiato. You can't quite do that at home. You might could, but it's going to be a little difficult. You'd rather go.
I like that. That's how it's transformed, right? So it's completely different experience. And like your macchiato has all that extra stuff in there and foam and all this extra fancy stuff, right?
Right.
So then let's see where we go from there. And so now when we go into redefinition, you're talking about taking the technology and creating a learning task that you could have never given your kids in the regular classroom without the technology. Like you almost have to always have the technology to do it. So completely creation of a new task. This is like the apex of education. This is where we really want to try to push ourselves to make sure that we're giving our kids the new learning opportunities. And so this is where you really start to tie in that global collaboration and multimedia presentations and really student generated learning. That's where they're driving the learning. So think about Google Earth, being able to travel all over the world and show our kids faraway countries. We could have not done that. We had our solid maps, we could actually fly and go under the water and see what's there and walk the streets using Google Earth. That's an inconceivable idea up until the invention of Google Earth. Think about Skyping or with another class across the country. So really connecting with others or inviting authors in or doing a streamable learning opportunity where you go and take a virtual field trip. These are the things that redefine learning through the use of technology. And so in our coffee world, this would be what, Dan?
I would say pumpkin spice latte, because that is redefined. There, you don't really think of coffee anymore when you think of I think of a milkshake or a dessert.
Dessert, yeah, so sweet.
You know, it's still related to coffee. Think of that original lesson plan or whatever. But it has totally just transformed into this wonderful thing.
Experience that we can't live without, right?
Right.
Yep, absolutely. And so while we're talking about SAMR, it's easy to think about it in that step ladder kind of sense: substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. But it really is not. And so it's important that you as a teacher, if you take a minute to reflect, you may find that you're really doing a lot of stuff in the substitution and augmentation area and maybe not so much in modification and redefinition. And so don't feel down and don't feel bad about that. Just ask yourself, how can you move things forward? And then what things should just be substitution? We know there are certain pedagogical strategies that just require substitution for students to learn. So think about this example, for example, Jan, vocabulary. How do you, without technology, if I said, here are 10 words I need you to know the word and the meaning, how would you prep for that? What would you do with no technology?
With no technology, I'd say note cards.
Flashcards, absolutely, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do your note cards, your flashcards, and you practice them, and you get better at them. Well, if we substitute that and put in a Quizlet, and maybe even a little bit of augmentation by having the Quizlet check our answers, I'm still learning vocabulary, and that's the best pedagogical strategy for that. So there's no reason to take my learning vocabulary into redefinition if it works fine at substitution. So just keep that in the back of your mind, that there's no need for every learning opportunity to be a redefinition. But do we want to challenge ourselves and push ourselves? Yes. And so that's the goal of SAMR, is just for you to reflect on your activities and think about how do you push yourself forward. So we want to share a few tech tools that you can use to help you with these different areas, and also give you another real life examples of how to use SAMR in instruction and how you push yourself forward. And so first example we have is in substitution. That's the use of the Google Doc to write the report for causes of the revolution. So, and this is something too, as time changes, technology advances, some things that used to seem like augmentation, they eventually kind of move into that substitution role as things change. So we think about using a Google Docs, Google Chrome, and Google Chrome to do your research. You can use these two things to research and write your paper. And you're just substituting the encyclopedia for Google Chrome and your notebook for your Google Doc. But then to move it into augmentation, where we have some improvements and benefits, you could create a slide presentation, so you could include pictures and animation and even video in there. Or you can also use some of the search engines to improve your search quality. So if you use NC Wiseout or Destiny Follett, which we all have access to, this will provide our kids with rich educational resources that have already been vetted, so you don't have to worry about them getting misinformation just by going straight to Google. So that gives us that added benefit of augmentation. And then from there, you can move it on into modification. If I want to change the learning experience a little bit, but they're still looking at the causes of the French Revolution, I could say, create a podcast instead of writing a paper. They still would have to write out their draft, but they're going to use and present it in a different way. So maybe they use GarageBand or the media recorder in Canvas, or even Buckaroo or SpeakPipe. If you've not checked out these two tools, they're great audio tools to quickly and easily record audio and share it out with your teacher or with your students. So these are great little ways to just change the learning task a little bit, give them a new opportunity. And then you could take it even a step further and have them collaborate with each other to create a documentary of the French Revolution, of the causes, and publish it to the school's website. So now they're creating that bigger global audience. And so they could use iMovie to make their video. They can use Adobe Spark to make their video or web page that they share out to a bigger audience. And so really transforming what they can do with their activity.
So here we have an example of a science experiment. And so for substitution, instead of watching a teacher do the science experiment in front of the classroom, you would actually watch the students would watch a pre-recorded video of the science experiment. And here we have some digital tools that can be used for that, which is Loom. Loom is a great video recording tool. You're watching a YouTube video of the science experiment. The teachers can record these videos in QuickTime or Loom, so the students can watch them. Then we can take it a step further into augmentation, and the students will watch the video, but then they'll start answering questions on the video using an online platform like Edpuzzle. So Edpuzzle, if you haven't used it before, you have a video, you can use a YouTube video or a video you've recorded and upload to YouTube, and you can have questions embedded in the video as they go along. You can use another tool like PlayPosit, which is basically the same as Edpuzzle. So then we take it to Modification, where the students are actually doing the science experiment virtually on a platform like Discovery Ed or FET, where they have simulations of the science experiments. And then they can share those reflections on a video blog, which can be, you can use Flipgrid for that. I think that's a popular tool right now as we're doing remote learning. And then when we take it all the way to the top to redefinition, we have the students participate in the virtual field trips and actually can interact and talk to scientists and discuss the outcomes of those scientific concepts. And right now, recently, we've just added Streamable Learning to our digital tools toolbox, I guess.
And I actually just jumped into a class the other day, and they were doing, they actually had vultures and stuff, and they were looking at them in the Streamable Learning. It was really neat.
And you can actually schedule virtual trips for your students, and they can actually talk live with the presenters
the presenter, ask them questions. It was so cool. So if you're interested in Streamable Learning, reach out to your digital learning and media coordinator, and they'll be glad to help you access that, find out more information.
And also another way to do it would be through Skype, which everybody's pretty familiar with Skype. So redefinition is basically taking it out somewhere else. That's how I look at it, global
perspective, yeah, that connection to the world, making the world a little bit smaller. We also have included in the slides some resources to help you. This is the Wheel of Pedagogy. What I like about this is it talks about the SAMR model. You'll see it on the outside. It has some tools. This is a little bit of an older resource here, so some of the tools may be out of date, but I like that it's got your levels of bloom here, and then it gives you some verbs just to help you think about how you can take your activity and start to transform that. So that's a great resource that's here. And then I also, on the last slide, have some resources from Common Sense Media, just a little bit more about the SAMR model if you want to dive in a little deeper to understanding it and its connection with Bloom's taxonomy. And then Matt Miller, he's one of our favorites, Ditch to Textbook, has a lot of different articles on SAMR and how you can think about redesigning your instruction to transform your instruction. So after all of this, Jan and I hope that you have a better understanding of SAMR and how you can really challenge yourself as you design your instruction to push yourself to that transformation stage. We challenge you to take one of your upcoming lessons and evaluate it using your SAMR model and see if you can just take it up a notch. See what you can do to notch up your SAMR game and become a SAMR samurai. That's all for this episode of Ready, Set, EdTech. We hope you'll catch us next time.
Bye.